Alright, so in this video, I want to show you how to drop certain undesirable rows from a data frame, and I also want to show you how we can change up the index on our data frame to add document IDs to track these emails. So numbering these emails sequentially rather than with these unintelligible file names that we've got by default. So our first goal is dropping these three rows here with the index by the name of commands, CMDS, and dropping the index with the name .ds_store. So I'll add a little markdown cell here, and that's going to read remove system file entries from data frame. And the way we're going to do this is using the data frame's drop function. So this is a method that takes a couple of arguments, right? It needs to know which file names to drop. So I'm going to supply that as a list, square brackets, single quotes, and then CMDS, comma, single quotes, .ds_store. Now, remember, no typos here, and you'll succeed. So as it is, this will drop the three rows with this index, and it will drop the one row with this index. What we could do is we could overwrite our data frame with this modified version here. So we can drop the rows and we can overwrite the data that's stored in our data frame. But the alternative of doing it this way is supplying another argument to this method, and that's called inPlace. inPlace is set to false by default, and if we set it to true, then we don't have to do this. We just can write the method like so, and it will update our data frame. Now, before I hit Shift Enter on this cell, let me copy this line of code here and paste it here, just to make sure that this row does indeed disappear. Let's take a look. All right, so the entire thing shifted up, so we're not seeing the same emails right here. We're having a different number of rows. So it seems to have worked. Let's take a look at what the shape is of our data frame now. Data.shape gives us 5,796. So 4 entries have been dropped, and this is how we've done it. Brilliant. Now let's replace these index names. Let's change these index names to something else, maybe just some numbers, right? So let's just number our rows from 1 to 5,796. I'll quickly add a markdown cell, and I'll say add document IDs to track emails in dataset. We're going to be doing some manipulation of these emails, so it's going to be quite nice to be able to have a specific ID associated with each specific email, so we can pull it up and refer to it later on. Let's generate our document IDs first. So I'll create a variable called document_IDs, and this will be equal to the values, say 0 to 5,796. So we can use the inbuilt range function from Python, starting from 0 and going through the length of our data frame. So data.index will give us the length of our data frame. Let's take a look at what this looks like. Document IDs is now a range from 0 to 5,796. We're not printing out the individual numbers here, but that actually doesn't change how we can use this object. So we can create a new column, say data, square brackets, single quotes, doc_id, so doc ID, and set that equal to our document IDs. And if we take a look at what this actually looks like, then we would get something like so. We'd still have our file names as the index, but now we have a column with all the document IDs from 0 to 5,795, right? 95, why? Because it's this length minus 1, right? There's 5,796 entries, but since we start counting from 0, the last entry is 5,795. All right. So this is what our new column looks like. Fair enough. Now let's shift all these file names into another column. I'll say data, square brackets, single quotes, file underscore name, all in caps, is equal to data dot index, the index being these file names right here. This will create a new column with all these file names. So if I say data.head, now what we see is we've got our index, we've got our category here, we've got the message column, we've got the document ID column, and we've got the file name column, which at the moment is the same as our index. However, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set my index to be equal to my document IDs. And the way we can do this is simply by saying data is equal to data dot set underscore index. So this is a method on our data frame, and we simply specify doc underscore ID in single quotes. If I hit Shift Enter now, this will update. But similar to our drop method, which had this in place parameter here that we can set to true, we can do the very, very same thing with set index. Shift tab on my keyboard brings up the quick documentation, and I can see here that we can change this here to true as well, and then get rid of this bit of code and write a comma here, and then in place is equal to true. This will accomplish the exact same thing. Here's what it looks like. Now we've got our document IDs as our index. We've got our category, 1 for spam, 0 for non-spam, our email bodies in the message column, and our file names we've preserved as a separate column in our data frame. Fantastic. Now let's quickly check what the end of our data frame looks like. Data.tail, we can see the last 5 rows. The last row has the document ID 5,795 that holds a message body starting with the words if you run. All right, so we've done a lot of data cleaning now. We've extracted our relevant data from the raw text files, namely the email bodies. We've converted them into a data frame. We've checked for empty emails, and we've checked for null or missing values as well. And then we've dropped all the rows that didn't contain an email body from our pandas data frame.